Senator Carlin, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for taking some time on for us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Let's start with the majority party in the Iowa legislature in the last General Assembly was pretty busy and had a broad agenda and was able to accomplish most, if not all, of what was on that agenda and what it wanted to do. So just kind of, and we'll get into more individual subjects as we move forward, but just kind of give us a general assessment, if you will, on how and why you think Iowa is a better place today as a result of the work done by the last General Assembly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess the main issue we always need to look at is money. How are we going to raise revenue? What are we going to tax the people? And how are we going to pay our bills? And how are we going to grow? And you know, when I look at what we did in the last legislative session with the tax reform bill, we're bringing incentive back into economic growth in Iowa. We're lowering tax rates, allowing families to keep more of the money that they earn. We're making inroads in terms of our competitiveness with our neighbors. Those are big things. You have to have a path that grows revenues, creates jobs, incentivizes growth, and you have to have a path that respects the economic security of families that are faced, young families in particular, with the cost of health care going where it is. Every dollar matters to young working families, particularly if you graduated from college and you're just starting out trying to take care of your family. Under President Obama, we saw the federalization of health care that wiped out all of our private pay providers. And the reality of that is the costs went way up. And so if you look at the average Iowan, one study says, works till April 14th to pay their tax bill. If you add another 10% of that in terms of looking at it as a calendar, that takes you into the end of May. If you add another 10 to 20% of that to pay the cost of student loans, that takes you into July or August before you make a mortgage payment, before you make a car payment, before you save any money or buy any groceries. So we really need to look at ways to limit how much government takes out of the pockets of the people and at the same time meets its funding. Now the exciting thing is at the end of 2018, our revenues, we had a budget surplus of $127 million. We're on a good path right now. The REC estimates for 2019 and 2020 are very encouraging from what we've heard. We created a health care platform that doesn't have all the mandates of Obamacare, that will allow people who don't have a lot of pre-existing conditions to get lower cost coverage. And that will make a big difference to 24,000 Iowans who couldn't afford health insurance. And we're working. We put together some mental health. We put together a mental health bill where we collaborated with our professionals from around the state and said, help us put this thing together. And they did. And we created more access. And we created more coordination, more communication with law enforcement. And we just came up with a better platform for mental health. So that just, in substance, is three things that come to mind for me that Iowans are going to benefit from.
Now, the critics of the tax package would say that, and have said to us as we've conducted these interviews, that the tax bill was weighted too much to affluent Iowans, corporations, and the middle class in Iowa got little to nothing out of it.
Sure.
And you say to them?
Well, my response to that is, if you pay less taxes, you're going to get less of a tax cut. I mean, that's to be expected. But percentage-wise, it's in substance equal. One of the things we need to remember is higher income people create the jobs, invest the money that create the opportunity for economic growth. This notion that the rich people aren't paying their fair share, they pay the bulk of the bills of the state. And that is something that can't be overlooked. So they're creating jobs, they're paying the bills, and they're being demonized. If you make $1 million in Iowa, $370,000 out of it goes to the federal government, and then another $60,000 of that goes to the state government. I don't think you're screwing somebody over when you're paying $430,000 in taxes out of every million you earn, and at the same time you're the one investing the money in the state to get it on a path to economic growth. We want working families to have more money in their pockets. In 2019, they're going to get a 10% tax cut. In 2023, it's going to go over 20%. It's going to be significant. Is it going to be, to where we're refunding money, thousands of dollars? No. But it's going to represent something significant to those working families, and they are going to benefit from it.
What's your overall assessment of how the move to privatization of Medicaid has gone? That's one of the biggest issues, obviously, in the state today. It's dominating in some ways the race for governor. Obviously, there are problems within the system, but give us your overall view on how that transition has gone, where you see problems, room for improvement. I presume you're not someone who would ditch the privatization model and go back to how we were doing things before.
No. All right, again, so the best legislation addresses realities. And one of the realities that Governor Branstad was faced with was the cost of health care was on an 18% annual trajectory. Now, if those costs keep going up, you're going to have to make cuts in other areas of the budget, public safety and education, to be able to adequately fund health care. We couldn't do that. And so he came up with the privatization of health care with the MCOs. And, I don't think anybody could reasonably argue that there haven't been problems. There have been problems, but the process itself is in its infancy. We've only been at it a few years. It's going to be tweaked. Adjustments are going to be made. I had a situation where we have a fragile healthcare facility in Morningside, and they saw their funding drop pretty significantly. But with the help of Representative Dave Heaton, we worked together, and we got the funding to keep that facility open. So the thing is legislators, I think, are going to get more involved in the management of it. One of the things, and this is just an idea that's occurred to me, if you have fixed foreseeable costs, that they're going to be the same, they're going to be needed, they're not discretionary, I don't know that it would be a bad idea to have a public arm, like have a public and private component to healthcare where part of it is run by the state and part of it is run by an MCO on the more discretionary type decisions. If that's a better path to save the state money. But, the notion that, it's some heartless process simply isn't a fair characterization of my Republican colleagues and their involvement in it. They're very engaged in the conversation. We value and know about the things our constituents face, and we try to do something about it. But there's definitely, as you said, there's room for improvement, and we're going to see it.
Talk about education a little bit. That's another issue that gets a lot of discussion. There's division about the level to which the state contributes to K-12 schools in the state. 1%, I believe, this past session, a little over 1% the session before. Do you think the state is doing right by public education, K through 12 schools, in terms of the funding it provides? Again, or is it falling short?
Sure. No, again, it comes down to realities, all right? We had a down year in the ag economy on prices. Our economy, or our budget rather, sinks or swims on how ag does, because ag isn't just about commodities prices, it's about the manufacturers, it's about the businesses that are connected to agriculture. And if you get a down year on corn and beans, it's going to affect a lot of other things, and it's going to affect your revenue at the end of the year. Our revenues were down, and when the revenues are down, we have less money to spend. And as Republicans, we're committed to only spend 99% of what we bring in. And you have to make tough decisions on where the cuts are going to be. But K through 12 spending was the only area of spending that we didn't cut. And we gave a 1% increase. It was the best we could do under the circumstances. We're not willing to write checks with red ink. We saw that happen under Governor Culver, where I think we're still paying interest on the deficits that we ran up over $800 million. And we're not willing to do that. We think a better long-term path for meeting our bills and our obligations and growing economically require fiscal responsibility of us. We're only going to spend what we take in.
Go back then to the tax cuts package. Given the fact that the ag economy was down and revenues were down, was this a good year to do tax cuts?
Well, the thing is that the objective is to grow. And right now, we realized a $127 million budget surplus at the end of the year. I think we're on that path. The thing is it's simple economics. If I have really high tax rates, which we did, we had the 4th highest personal income tax rate, or 5th highest personal income tax rate by some studies, and we had the highest corporate tax rate, you're killing the incentive for businesses to come into the state, to grow. And what our tax reform bill did was we brought some incentive back into it. We gave a 179 deduction for the cost of equipment purchases that in 4 or 5 years is going to allow businesses and farmers to take up to $1 million in equipment costs in the year of purchase. That makes a big difference to them. We want to look for ways that facilitate growth, allow Iowans to keep more of the money they earn, and still meet our obligations on our budget. And right now, at least the early indications are, with the 2nd lowest unemployment rate in the country, with the 7th highest gross domestic product rate in the country, we think we're on a good path. And we think it's the path of growth, and it'll meet our obligations.
Stick to taxes. The last time you were here, when you were running for the House for the first time, when we interviewed you, you talked about one of your priorities was senior citizens and a freeze, and I presume that still remains.
It still is.
And talk a little bit about what you would like to see happen in that regard.
Thanks for bringing that up. One of the things you learn down there is you don't get things done overnight, and sometimes it just takes a year of talking to colleagues. And I am on the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate. Randy Feenster's a friend of mine. I've discussed this bill with my colleagues, and what it would do if you are a senior on a fixed income of under $30,000 a year. It would freeze your property taxes at 65. It would also do this for people that are disabled. It would freeze property taxes. So we asked the Department of Revenue, what is this going to cost to do, to give a backfill for this? And it's estimated to be $13 million cost for the state of Iowa. It's affordable. And one of the reasons why it's affordable is seniors who can't keep their houses go into Medicaid-assisted living facilities or nursing homes. And so, it could actually save some money. And when you're a senior living on Social Security, where I live in Morningside, I've heard time and again how seniors who paid for their houses are paying an extra $200, $300, $400, in some instances $500 a month, or not month, a year, for property taxes. Well, Mike, if that happens 4 or 5 years in a row, we're now talking $1,000 out of an annual budget of $12,000 to $15,000. That's a big deal to them. I mean, not to sound. I met a lady who was actually concerned about the cost of groceries at a grocery store because she didn't know how she was going to make it. So when government reaches the point where you start to threaten the economic security of seniors, you really need to take a hard look at where you're going with that. They pay taxes all their lives, and at the end of their twilight years, you're going to make it harder for them. We need to do something about that, and I think we are going to see passage of it. I'm going to work very hard on that this year, and I've had some promising affirmations of where we could take that from quite a few of my colleagues.
I wanted to ask you a question about economic development incentives, which is still another big issue in the state, and there's division on it and differing viewpoints on how much we spend and how we spend it and what return on investment we get. What's your overall assessment of how the state is doing in terms of the amount of money it spends and how it spends its money on economic development incentives?
Well, when you have the highest corporate tax rate in the country, and We lowered it. I think we got it just under 10, and to be honest with you, I think we ranked, third or fourth highest now after making that cut. You have to incentivize businesses coming to Iowa, and as much as people hate tax credits, unless you're really willing to move substantively on the corporate tax rate and on the personal income tax rate, you're not going to attract a lot of business. Those CEOs get online and they look, okay, what's the corporate tax rate? What is the personal income tax rate? And they look at those things and they decide whether or not they're going to do business in Iowa because of that. So we have used corporate tax rates, and to be fair, I think we need to look at return investment. I think, we need, what are we getting in return for, giving this tax credit? We know in Northwest Iowa, we benefit enormously from targeted jobs. That's a proven commodity. It's needed to keep us competitive. It keeps bigger employers here. It's obviously working here. Some of these other tax credits, I think it's fair to look at what kind of return of investment are we really getting.
So in a way, the tax package that was passed could result in the need to rely less on incentive packages down the road. As those reductions in taxes create growth, perhaps the state will not need to spend as much in incentives.
I think that's a fair statement.
Because the tax climate overall will be more attractive.
I think that's a fair characterization of it. What you need to know also is a lot of tax credits were removed by the tax reform bill. I mean, one of our objectives with the tax reform bill is to have less reliance on tax credits and lowering of rates so that everybody benefits and has a lower rate. And I think as the revenues go up, it'll give us some more room to lower rates even further.
What are some local priorities that you would seek to champion if you are elected to a full term in the Senate? What are you hearing locally? These are priorities of ours. These are the things we want you to go fight for us on down in Des Moines.
Sure. I have had a lot of support for the senior property tax bill. I have had quite a few conversations with members from the chamber on targeted jobs. I've also visited area schools, and one of the big challenges of our educators is the IEP placement of children with behaviors and the impact it's having in our classrooms. I realize that's federal law, but I think we really need to look at the long-term implications of forcing teachers to manage behaviors at the expense of teaching the other kids that don't have those challenges. And then evaluating those teachers, evaluating their proficiency in teaching where they have a lot of kids with behaviors in those classrooms. It makes that job really, really hard. I think it has a big impact on morale for teachers. I visited area schools, and that's a big problem. And we can't just look the other way, because if you're a kid who's entering into K through 12 school, you're going to have that same challenge for 12 years, where the time that could have been spent on you is being spent, dealing with kids with issues on behavior that is diminishing the amount of time that you would otherwise get. We've put them in almost a no-win situation. If there's one thing I've learned, if people can't win, they lose heart. And we have to do something about that. Whether we could modify it slightly and have less IEP behavior placements, or the composition of teaching assistants, something has to be done for our teachers in that regard. And that's an issue that I've heard over and over again.
How about the local option sales tax for school infrastructure? Do you support extension of that?
I do, because it's just the reality of getting the bonding we need to build the buildings that we need for our schools. I mean, it's something that's there. It needs to be extended to get the bonding for the new builds that are, in my mind, are needed. If we reach a point where, we're comfortable that we're not going to need those bonding issues to justify that extra penny, then we can look at that down the road. But for right now, I would support it.
Do you feel like that's something that can get done this next session? Is your view that it's something that's getting closer to,
Sure.
to getting accomplished?
I think as we get closer to that deadline, you know, it's a kind of a political football. But I think it is going to get done. Whether it's this year or the year following, it will get done in time so that the bonding that's needed to fund our buildings, it'll be there.
Another issue that it doesn't just deal with education solely, but obviously education is a big part of the collective bargaining process. And
Sure.
the last General Assembly made changes in the Chapter 20 law. And I'm wondering, what's your viewpoint of those changes that were made? I presume you were supportive of them, and how do you think that makes Iowa better or stronger, those changes?
Okay. Well, what I told our teachers was, tell me after the ink is dry where you ended up. And, where did you end up on compensation and benefits? I think our teachers did okay. I mean, we have some of the highest paid teachers in the country. Our average base salary around here is very competitive. If you were to compare it to the rest of the country, they'd probably be 4th or 5th highest paid. And if you took the average of the state, I think it's estimated that they're the 8th highest paid teachers in the country are here in the state of Iowa. I think that speaks to the fact that there are competitive realities for teachers where teachers are going to go where they're going to be paid, and school boards have to deal with that reality, and they're going to pay their people. The benefits end of it, I think there was a $50 reduction in health insurance costs per month. I think they're allotted $962 a month towards health insurance, and state or IPERS picks up 9.4% of their base salary towards their retirement. So I think we're doing a good job taking care of our teachers. But the thing is, the relationship between management and labor is kind of like a marriage. If either person feels like they don't have a legitimate voice in the conversation, it's going to get bumpy. And I think that happened. That was like the very first bill that came on my desk when I was a House member. I think, I personally think that maybe a little bit too much was taken away. And people have to feel that they're being heard on issues that matter to them. And, I saw it as being needed simply because of the funding realities. That they would take the mean. Like if there was an impasse in negotiations, they would take the statewide mean, which when you have one body, the teachers union, defining all those other negotiations, and you're one individual school district, you're going to lose. But as I said, look at where your paycheck ended up. Did you get a little bit more money? In Sioux City, I think they got a 1.8% salary increase. It's not a huge increase, but it's an increase. And as I said, I think that's what you have to look at. Who did it hurt? We protected our law enforcement. We protected our firefighters. I was asked by the firefighters. I'm on the pension board for firefighters, and they said, do we have anything to be concerned about? And I said, what I look at? I mean, you're committed. You've literally committed your life to the service of the state. Your life is on the line, and the stress of your job actually statistically kills you guys younger. If you give a commitment, you get a commitment. And, that's why that special treatment was given. And I also think we probably need to expand that to include our jailers who are faced with incredibly stressful situations in our state prisons. They were left out of the collective bargaining. The jailers didn't get the same treatment as law enforcement and firefighters, and I think they should.
We have 5 minutes.
What do you think are your greatest personal attributes? reasons that you apply to the position of state lawmaker? What do you think makes you a strong legislator?
Okay.
Just kind of describe yourself.
Sure. Oh, I've been a lawyer for 27 years. I've represented families through divorce proceedings. I've represented them in jury trials. I've represented people in criminal proceedings. I have a very broad base of life experience that understands some of the harsh realities that people have to deal with when it comes to paying their bills or dealing with life's adversities. And I think maybe the strongest component of what I bring to the table is I really think about that stuff. I mean, I really care about what happens to people, and I care about how things affect people. You know, I want to know the realities. You know, even if it doesn't jive with my politics, politics aside, where are the realities of this conversation? Because that's what we need to be looking at, you know. And sometimes, you know, broad brushes are put across the canvas of issues, and the realities don't get as much attention as they need to receive. And that's what I want to know. How is this going to affect people? Is this going to, you know, at the end of the day, is this going to help people? And that's, you know, as best we can, we need to be driven by a sincere desire to see people succeed and live well, have a good quality of life, not be too burdensome on their paychecks, or, you know, their ability to keep their homes, or their ability to pay the light, you know, cliche, but their light bill as a small business. Don't make government the master. Put it, you know, make it the servant of the people.
Up top, I said that the majority had a broad agenda of accomplishments in the last session of the General Assembly. Let's say the numbers remain the same. What's the next chapter? What do the next 2 years bring, do you believe, in terms of the majority, the conservative, Republican majority, if you remain in the majority? What's next for you? What do you think the priorities should be? I mean, you've done the heartbeat bill, you've done the collective bargaining, you've done the tax package, the Second Amendment bill that was passed. What's next? What should be next?
Right. Well, you know, the thing is, Mike, if you're on a good path, you look to see if you can stay on that path of allowing people to keep more money. And the bottom line is, you know, can we give people more of our money and still keep our revenues where they need to be? Can we grow our revenues where we're able to do more things? Improve health care, improve education, improve public safety. You know, we want to see those things improve. We want to see more state troopers on our highways and more teachers in our classrooms. You know, we want to see health care improve. If we can get the funding up, it enables us to do more. If we can get the funding up, maybe we can make some more tax cuts. You know, we want Iowa to be a place that gives people opportunities and a good quality of life and a path of growth, and to be able to meet basic needs for people who can't take care of themselves. I mean, the broad-based picture, we want to get on a path that benefits all Iowans, and not just, you know, one particular category or social strata or economic level. You know, that's where we want to be.
Why are you the best choice in this race?
I think I'm the best choice in this race because I think what we're doing and what I believe in is working. We're seeing business come back to Iowa. We're seeing growth. We're seeing lower unemployment rate. We're seeing people, you know, being able to keep more of the money that they earn. Those, you know, just basic economic realities, which so much of this, of what we do, is tied into that. We're on a much better path. You know, we're not going to continue to spend and tax people more and grow as a state. You know, like for instance, in Northwest Iowa, our tax policies resulted in us losing our healthcare professionals and the people in our financial services to South Dakota. That's a reality of poor taxation policy and planning. And good?
Good.
Thank you for your time
Sure.
today, Jim.